Good afternoon, guys. It is Sunday. Sunday. And we've got some scraps for the chickens. We had a margarita night. Hey, ma'am. Come here, sweet girl. Come here. What are you doing? At this point, I'm not even sure why I keep them fenced in anymore. Free. Alright. Hold on. You know, I thought the roosters would be a little bit more protective of the girls when they constantly fly out. But these dudes just stay in here. They don't even try and get them back in. Goodness. I need to retie these down. So these are just like dollar cat boxes you could pick up at like the dollar store. And I just put holes in them and then zip tied them through this fencing at the bottom so they stay. And I had originally taken them off because the girls kept pooping in there, so I was having to clean them. But now they've kind of stopped again and I need to tie them back down because they just toss the eggs everywhere in there and it's gross. I have been getting way more eggs though. This week, I want to say a couple days ago, we got 7. And then yesterday we got 6. So we are definitely back in eggs again. And soon, with 10 hens, we're gonna be getting about 10 eggs a day, which is almost a dozen a day. And I don't know what I'm gonna do with a dozen eggs a day. So Chase and I were on an ATV ride yesterday. And all along, so I live next to a river levee, the Rio Grande River levee. It's dry right now. They turn off the river. They only turn it on for a couple months a year. It's a whole thing, but there's a ton of pecan tree orchards along this route that we like to ride. And I found these guys all over the river levee. These white plastic tree covers. So what the pecan farmers do is these are just some sort of plastic or PVC that latches here, and when they're growing new smaller trees, they put them around, but they pop open so that when the tree trunk gets big enough, it can just rid itself of the plastic barrier. And with our winds here, they just blow everywhere. So I saw them laying along the ground and I was like, we have to pick these up. And I picked up a bunch that had just blown away from the property. I didn't trespass or anything. What a neat find, because otherwise I would have had to buy tree covers for all these trees, and it's not too expensive, but it's for free. So my tree planting with the pecans went well. I actually ended up having to dig these holes about 5 feet deep. So as tall as I am, I had to dig these holes. The taproots on these pecans were so long, which is awesome. That's great. I'm glad I got such amazing trees, but goodness, I had to dig so much. And then, of course, Freya happened and she thought that the trees were toys. And she took to gnawing on these trees because they tasted good. Now I don't think this one's damaged too badly. It just had some surface damage on the top. I am a little worried about this tip, but like I said, she didn't go all the way through. And then I have since put these tall fences around them so that she can't get to them. That girl is gonna be the death of me. Aren't you? You're gonna be the death of me, huh? Free. So I had originally planned to start pepper seeds with you guys today. And I really wanted to start seeds because I'm so excited to start seeds, but life happened. We have some stuff to do today. So I'm gonna go over my tentative plans for the garden. Those are absolutely gonna change. But for now, I think I have a rough estimate of what I wanna do just based on the soil that I have in some of these beds, like how some of my first beds have amazing soil because I've been building it up for years, and then these newer beds, not so good. So on here, this is the south side. We have 4 garden beds, trellises all along down here, 4 more garden beds, 1 long one about 10 feet long right here, and then the in-ground garden continuing all the way to the driveway. These 2 beds, the one that has all of my garlic in it and some of these old broccoli and other herbs that are in this one, these are my 2 oldest standing beds. So these 2 have the best, most absolutely richest soil. That makes me want to put my most important plants in them, but unfortunately this bed is going to be taken up with the garlic until it comes to maturity, probably sometime in April. Hopefully not May. Hopefully they're done by April, but we'll see. So that kind of takes this bed out of commission for the actual spring planting in April. But this one is where I'm gonna have one of my pepper beds. Not only are peppers one of my favorite crops, if not my one most favorite crop to grow, this is also an area that gets a lot of afternoon sun because the shade cloth obviously doesn't cover the sun coming in from the west here. And peppers are the only ones that can take that heat very well, you know, besides okra and some other crops. But this, with being one of my most rich beds and having a lot of sunlight, I'm just gonna have the peppers in this bed, some of them. Now right in front of it, this is a 4x4 bed, and so is that one over there. I want to put my determinate tomatoes in one of these 4x4 beds because it will be far easier to trellis them if I have, you know, just like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I could do some sort of, I don't have any of those like tomato, I feel like the wind is blowing in y'all's face. Is that better? I don't know. I don't have any of those like tomato towers you buy at Lowe's or Home Depot, but I do have a lot of cattle panels that I've cut up over the years and just spare pieces. And keeping determinate tomatoes in this small space where it's easy to just put a small trellis in seems more appealing to me than wasting one of these large beds. Not that it's a waste, but I would rather save the larger beds for the more sprawling tomatoes, which are indeterminate. I don't know. It makes sense in my head. So I haven't decided if it's going to be this 4x4 or this 4x4. But sense is telling me that I should grow them here in this 4x4 because this long 10-foot bed is where I plan to have some tomatoes. Not all of them. But I do plan on putting a cattle panel trellis down this end and then growing indeterminate tomatoes on that half of the bed. So if you're new to this channel, I lost my entire crop of 16 tomato plants that I planted out last year in these 2 beds, this one and that one, to something. I never figured out what it was. I'm not sure if it was in the soil or if it was a pest-borne disease, because a lot of the problems, and they died very young, resembled a pest-borne disease. So I was determined this year to not cripple myself by putting all of my plants of the same variety in the same area. So I am not going to plant one huge wall of tomatoes this year. I'm going to break up my peppers, my tomatoes into different beds. That way, if it is some sort of pest-borne disease and I have one bed taken out by them, maybe they won't find the other bed of tomatoes that I have. So that's why I'm saying some of the peppers will go here, some of the tomatoes will go here, because I am going to divvy up the location of these plants. I'm just not real sure I know where they're gonna go until I plant them. Now these 2 front beds are the 2 beds I just built recently. They're brand new with brand new soil, and they are not under the cover of this shade cloth for half the day. And the soil is also very new, and the layers that I made like a kind of lasagna garden. What, babe?
It needs the pliers.
The pliers. Not in the toolboxes.
I found the pliers.
Does anyone else ever have to find things for their men? So any plants that go in here have to be tolerant of full hot desert sun for at least half the day. Now I have already decided that this first bed is going to house my onions, my onion transplants and sets that I have, which I do plan on starting next week. I haven't planted them yet because the weather was warming up. I mean, it's still, the high is supposed to be 70 today. I'm in a very large jacket, but it's supposed to be 70 degrees today. But all next week, we're getting down into the 20s at night. I guess we're gonna be cloudy all next week, and it's just gonna bring this cold front through. So I kind of wanted to wait until it warmed up a little bit. I don't know. I don't know if the onions are gonna do that well, but we're gonna try it. This is an experiment. I've never started my own onion seeds and then transplanted out the plants. I've always started them from seeds in the beds. So they might all bolt because of the stress that they've gone through, but I'm not gonna not plant them. We're gonna plant them. But I think for this bed, I'm going to do a mixture of squash and cowpeas or beans because they'll be able to take the full sun. They'll also get some shade in the afternoon, of course, but of all the crops that I plan on planting, those are the ones that I think will do the best in these kinds of conditions. And I also don't want any deep-rooted plants going in these first two beds because the mixture that I put on the bottom of the beds isn't composted. So I don't really want plants diving down super deep for nutrients that they're not gonna find. And beans are one shallow-rooted plant. Squash and others can get a little deeper with their roots, but they're not gonna be super, super deep. They don't have tap roots, things like that. I think that'll be the best choice. I don't think I'm gonna change my opinion on that. Maybe. All of these trellises are gonna be holding beans. I have several different types of beans to grow. One of them is gonna be the yard-long asparagus bean. Another is a rattlesnake pole bean. And then I recently got another bean from Baker Creek. I think it's the purple whole pink eye or something like that. It's a cowpea variety, and cowpeas are a southern pea that does very well in hot climates, so I tend to lean towards that when I'm growing beans. But that's gonna be a new bean that I'm trying this year, and those are gonna cover these three trellises. I also grow cucumbers on trellises, although I'm gonna be putting the cucumbers at the end of the beds because what I have here is a shorter cattle panel that I prop up against the end of a bed. So it's not a full arcing cattle panel, but it will trellis in a small area, and that's what I tend to use the cucumbers for. I don't have great luck with cucumbers because of the heat, but I can get a harvest. I think I'm gonna try and succession sow them this year. So have, you know, plant out my cucumber seeds at the beginning of the season, and when they start to peter out in the summertime, like July, I'll just rip them out and then start more seeds right at the onset of the monsoon season. And I think that will be successable this year. I'm just gonna have a seat in the barn because I feel like the breeze is ruining the audio. But I've decided I'm not gonna I've decided I'm not gonna build any more garden beds this year. And that is for two reasons. The primary reason being the money involved. I have spent a ton of money on the garden this year, which is okay. It's all been investments into long-term growing and long-term food production. So I don't regret that at all, but it does cut back on, you know, the yearly budget that I have to be spending on the garden. So for example, finishing the rest of the shade cloth structure cost several $100s, along with having to buy a whole new shade cloth to attach to the rest of the structure that I built. On top of the beds costing about $100 to build and more than $100 to fill, it's just added up. And although I understand that there are investments that you have to make into the overall structure of your garden to profit long term, I don't have to get it all done this year. And that's something that I'm really trying to keep in my head as I come through this gardening season because of what happened last year when I left my career. So I told you guys in a short little channel intro I did a while ago that when I left my career in law enforcement, I really threw myself just like 200% into homesteading. And at the time I was going through a minor loss in identity and just trying to figure out how I had left this job to start this dream of homesteading, and I wasn't really sure how I was supposed to implement it. And I just took it way too far and did things way too quickly, and I really overworked myself. And I never want to overwork myself or overspend myself to the point that this is no longer enjoyable to me, that it becomes a chore. I love coming out and working in the yard and getting my hands dirty and putting in the sweat equity, all for, you know, one little carrot that I get to pull up and eat out of the ground. I love that. What I don't want to do is lose that. With this new gardening season and all of these plans I had, I was starting to just run wild. I mean, obviously I just bought 2 more pecan trees a day after I received an order of bare root trees. Once I started to feel like building a new bed, a 3rd bed this year was a chore, or that it was going to cut into my finances, I pulled the brakes. I said, you don't need any more beds than you already have. You provided more than enough food these last 2 years with what you currently have. I could always grow more because I could always preserve more, but we're not struggling right now. And if I go and blow all my money this year on just trying to fill out this garden immediately, that would be struggling. At that point, we would be struggling. You know, it's good to be prepared, and it's good to want to be prepared for the worst even, and grow your own food and preserve your own food, and to not want to have to rely on the grocery store to get your food. But you don't have to get it all done in 1 year. It has taken me 3 years to get to where this garden is today, and I'm nowhere near done, but every single one of those years I have grown copious amounts of food. And I've done it stress-free because I've enjoyed every single season I had with the garden. And spreading this time out of building the garden also helps you out in the long run, because you end up changing things. The plans that I had for this garden my first year have drastically changed from what I have now. And that's just not my preferences. That's based on having 3 years on this property and realizing and learning how the weather is, and the precipitation and the sun and the wind. And every year that it takes me to build this garden, I learn a little bit more and make a few changes just to make the garden year better. So I don't need to get it all done this year. And we are absolutely gonna grow so much food this year that I will not know what to do with it all in the kitchen. So as our expansion goes, for now, for this spring season, I'm not gonna be building any more garden beds. I will add garden beds before the fall season, but I'm also expanding the property elsewhere. We're getting meat birds in March. We're thinking about pigs, maybe. I'm expanding the orchard and growing cover crop beans in the orchard, so there's food everywhere. I don't need to spend $500 more to get 2 more garden beds out of this garden this season. So with that, guys, I'm gonna head back inside, and just want to let you know, it doesn't all have to get done this year. Fireside Farms wasn't built in a day. Until the next one.